Hi guys, welcome along to Let's Talk on OTM Media. My name is Colm Kelly and I'm bringing this show here today. We're trying to open up the discussion to talk about mental health, and on this particular one, we've had a series, we've talked about lots of different things. If you need to talk, if you're trying to talk, if somebody talks to you, and what is mental health, we've got lots of different ones, and we've included Justin's story. Justin is my guest on the show. We're going to talk to him about this one as well, but today's one is how to end the stigma around mental health. There is a lot of stigmas, unfortunately, still in the world in 2018, and mental health is one of those ones that still has that stigma. It's not as bad as it would have been, back in our parents' time or before that, when it just was a non-existent thing, basically. But now we're starting to get more literature on it. There's more talk about it, and we're here to try and open up that door and have a little bit more discussion about it. But I guess, Justin, it's a tough topic to cover, but what is the stigma around mental health? I would see it as, people think that it's a weakness. They don't see it as an illness. They see it as a sign of weakness and a person, and people kind of tend to look down at them. The other problem I have with the stigma around mental health is we see incidents happen in the world in terms of the world news. We see shootings in places like America, and then the first thing they say is, was this person mentally ill? And they kind of, that there puts the stigma back into it, that people are afraid to come forward and talk and say that they have an issue, because then people start to think of them, as having the stigmatized, insanity, or, that they're just not trustable or not good people. And that is not the case. Obviously, as we've discussed in our other shows, with mental illness, it does affect everybody. So what, in your eyes, is the stigma? Do you think it's around those same lines as I put it into, or have you other ways that you see the stigma of mental illness being discussed in modern society?
Yeah, I think it's a part of it, but I think you touched on a good point at the beginning there, is that I feel like it's getting better. I think when our parents were young and their parents, we're going back sort of, 40, 50 plus years, it was, I don't know for sure, but it was probably a lot worse than it is today. I think, I think today it is getting better, but we have to keep going. We have to keep talking about it. Yeah, we have to keep putting a message out there. I think for me, it's when I was going through it, and through the early stages in particular, I think I didn't feel like I could talk about it because, a lot of people just think, I think it is partly that weakness thing. You're afraid that people are just going to go, oh, you're just feeling down, you're just having a bad day, get over it. Don't be such a wimp or whatever. And some people can be like that, I think, purely because they a lack of understanding from that person's point of view. And I think that touches on to what you mentioned in one of the previous segments, is that if somebody comes to you and wants to talk to you, just do a quick Google search and just have a quick 10, 15-minute read about it. Will help you understand it. You don't have to become an expert, but at least have a general understanding of what they might say to you, or what you might be getting into. So for me, I've always considered it to be like you go to someone, like you go to one of your mates that you go down a pub with, and you go, oh, look, last couple of weeks I've been feeling really down. I'm feeling really depressed. It might be because of things at home or your relationship, and they may just turn around and go, oh, you'll be all right, mate. Come down, have some beers, and you'll get over it. It's a lot more serious than that, and it has to be, it has to be approached as such. So the stigma is still there. I think it's still there, but it is getting better. I mean, that's the good news. When you hear, for example, when Robin Williams, he was manically depressed, and he took his own life, a couple of years ago. And when that happened, I think people become more open to understanding it. He was much loved. I loved him. You probably loved him. The movies, the stand-up comedy. He was hilarious. Just one of the funniest and most entertaining guys in probably my lifetime. And I think when that happened, people become more sort of compassionate, I guess, towards it, towards mental illness. So I think it gets better. I think particularly when someone that whether it's someone in the public eye or not, that is suffering, I think there's a little bit more compassion these days. And I think social media helps with that. You see a lot of tweets, you see a lot of Facebook posts about people offering their support. I see it on Twitter as well. Some of my followers, some of the guys at ITP will always say my DM's always open. We're hearing more stories of people suffering. So I think we're on the right track with that. I think we're moving forward, and we're at least trying to get rid of the stigma. Yep. And I think that's important, because I think that makes it easier for people that are suffering to come out and talk about it. I think if the stigma wasn't getting better, I think people would be more afraid to do it. Yep. I think the more of the stigma we take away, the more likely that, and the easier it is for these people to come out and say, hey, look, I think I am depressed. I'm getting serious anxiety. I had a panic attack last week, or something like that. So the stigma's there. It's hard to get rid of, but I think we need to. A part of getting rid of it, or at least maybe not getting rid of it. That'd be hard, but making it less so is just to talk about it more. Particularly men. I think men struggle. I think more to talk about it than women. In my opinion, I could be wrong, but that's just my opinion. But I think the more that we as men come out and talk about it, I think that takes a little bit away from the stigma of it. So it's good to see that it's not as bad as it was, but we just need to keep going, and we need to try and get rid of that stigma and ultimately help the people out there that are suffering right now.
Yeah, and you touched on Robin Williams, obviously, and he's a man, obviously, who spent his entire life trying to make the world happy and make the world laugh. And unfortunately, I think the reason that it stood out so much with him is because he couldn't, make himself happy, and he had had depression, and obviously ended up taking his life. So it's just it just kind of opened up people's eyes that even because you're so happy, because you're making other people happy, that really has nothing to do with it. If you're portraying somebody on screen, so he kind of had to be that actor for his entire life, and obviously behind the scenes then it just was a completely different situation. And obviously we were talking about stigma there. With the stigma, I think a lot of it too is that we kind of then, if you have those doubts in your head, you start to think that you kind of self-stigmatize, that you think other people are going to think this of you if you do come out and say it. So there's that area too that we kind of, because there's such a stigma of it, people then keep it inside, and they kind of stigmatize themselves even when they haven't told other people. So that's another area I think that's a key area that we kind of need to work on and help those people who need to talk. I touched on it when we were starting off here, but when something happens, that the mainstream media use words like crazy or psycho or insane, and they're words like I put them in brackets that they can't really be used with mental illness. You can't tar everybody who has any sort of mental illness with anything that a mass shooting has to go on. It just isn't the same thing. There's no correlation there for me at all. So that's another area I think that we need to stop addressing that. And you mentioned as well with with social media. I think there's such great things with social media. I think there's a lot of bad that has come with social media, but one of the big positives I think is that you have that personal side, the social side that maybe 15 years ago, people couldn't put up online, I feel this, I feel that. And then, if somebody has a reach and, they have maybe they're a celebrity and they say something, then it opens up the door to other people to say like, oh, this person has that. Well, I can open up to them. It's like you mentioned, you shared your story. You have an article up on your Twitter handle at Justin1278, and it was a piece you did over a year ago. And that there piece has had people then come and reach out to you and share their story with you, and you've been able to help them through situations. So it is just that is one of the things I think with social media that is such an advantage, that helps erase that stigma just a little bit, that you have that personal side. Like you can share your story, like you're in Australia, I'm in Ireland, but I wouldn't have known your story if it wasn't for social media. So I think that is a huge benefit here as we try and erase the stigma a little bit more. And I guess when I mentioned it, your story and people contacting you on social media about it, that there's something that I think that is important to share as well.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, when I wrote the story, my thinking was, if this helps just one person, then me doing this is been more than worthwhile. And touching on the social media aspect of that, I mean, again, I think this can relate to people that if you have suffered and you're no longer suffering, as maybe not as bad as I am, share your story, put it out there. People are interested. I mean, when I did my story, you know, I think it's like the next day, Matt Harmon reached out to me. Now, for people who don't know, Matt Harmon he works for NFL.com. He's an analyst there. He does fantasy football and a lot of other things with the NFL, and which is something that we both love. There's a lot of people who know. You know, and you know, Matt Harmon reached out to me, and at the time he had his own podcast called The Backyard Banter, where guests come on and they talk about how they got into the industry and stuff like that. And I'd never had an interaction with Matt before, but he reached out to me, and we did a show with him, and we talked a bit of football, a bit of how I got into it, and obviously about the story as well, and that sort of helped to spread the message a little bit further, you know, a little bit more further than it already had. And I would never have been able to do that if not for social media. I wouldn't even be doing this if it wasn't for social media, because, you know, we've sort of interacted before over a little while now. And no, but without the Twitter and the social media, we wouldn't be sitting here doing this.
No. So it really does open up so many positive doors like that. Like, you know, we mentioned fantasy football. That's what we're both involved in. But like you've mentioned Matt, I've talked to Matt so many times. I've talked to people that I never thought I would talk to on my shows. And it's just all because of social media. So it helps open up those doors, and hopefully it'll open up those pathways as well. And it already has in your situation to talk about mental health. And that's what we're trying to do. Sometimes the problem isn't using the wrong words. Like I mentioned, people using the wrong words in mainstream media, or people when they're talking in general, you know, with the stigma and talking about certain keywords that I mentioned a moment ago. But sometimes it is that we're not talking those words at all. The people aren't talking about their mental health. And I think that's the key as to what we're trying to do with this series, is to get people opened up, talking about their mental health, and, you know, to try just to spread that awareness and talk a little bit more about it. Something as well, Justin, that I wanted to mention that's a very important part. And it's kind of what this is doing. You know, we shared your story in one of the segments. I hope people will go back and listen to that and watch it. But when you talk, and if you've been through that experience like you have, and you share those experiences to other people, that kind of speaking up and that self-advocacy and telling people that they're able to get through the other side, I think that's something that is so vitally important. And I mean, like you mentioned, like social media, I reached out to you to have you on this kind of series that we were doing, and it was the fact that, you know, letting people know that you've been there and you've made it through the other side. I think that's a key part. And I think if people are watching this and, you know, they have made it through, I think even just sharing your story with people that you know, and whether it's on social media, wherever it is, obviously you don't have to do that. But I think if people do take that step and talk about it, it does help those then that are suffering at the time.
Yeah, I think social media, we all see that it's positives, and we all see its negatives in many different ways. But social media can be used in a positive light in terms of mental health, and you know, whether it's just getting your previous story out there about it, or whether it's just talking to someone about it. Like I mentioned before, people were sending me messages and wanting some advice on what they should do or what they can do. So we can use it positively, and we can use it to get our messages out there, to offer our help to people. And I think it's important that, you know, without social media, then, you know, it would limit our abilities to be able to communicate with each other and help each other and share our stories, etc. So it's a positive thing, positive part of social media, and there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So, you know, a lot of people have their issues with social media. I have certain issues with social media, but there is a lot of good, as we mentioned, that does come off it. And when we're looking as well, the other thing I wanted to mention is when you talk about illness, you know, if you take the mental side out of it and talk about illness, if somebody broke their arm, you wouldn't say, well, you're weak, you broke your arm, or, you know, if they have, you know, any terminal illness, or they've, you know, cancer or something like that, you don't say, you know, oh, well, you're weak. But if you have a mental issue, that is a mental illness, that is still kind of the thought. And I think that people need to talk of it as an illness rather than as somebody having, you know, something wrong with them. You need to not really characterize the person just by their mental illness. Don't just dive into that. You wouldn't do it with another illness, so you shouldn't do it with mental illness as well. I think that's another stigmata. Do you still think that is a stigmata, that we need to look at it like an illness, like we do all other illnesses?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, you've pretty much made the point there, is that, you know, if someone's got a broken arm or broken leg, the approach to somebody with something like that. I mean, particularly if it's cancer or another terminal illness. Nobody turns around and goes, oh, you'll be all right, you'll get over it, or you're weak or anything like that. But yeah, as soon as someone says that they're feeling depressed or they're not, their mental health is deteriorating for whatever reason, then the approach is different. But it shouldn't be. It should be exactly the same. If someone's lying on the floor and their leg's broken, you're going to help them, right? You're going to try and help them. Maybe not lift them up, but you'll call an ambulance. You're going to help them to get the treatment to fix it, and that should be the case with mental health. If you see that somebody's struggling, or if they approach you, then you should naturally just want to help them in whatever way that you can. I mean, you're not professional, but you're going to help them at least. And again, like we said before about listening and opening your doors and saying, look, I'm here to talk, I'm here to listen, and what's going on. So that's the thing that's a little bit frustrating, is that we treat physical illnesses a lot different to mental illnesses, in terms of, if we know somebody's suffering, our approach should be exactly the same. We shouldn't be sitting there saying, well, you're weak, or you'll get over it, because you wouldn't say that if someone's broken their arm or broken their leg or back or whatever it might be. So, and that's the challenge we probably face at the moment. Is, I know we've touched on the stigma not being quite as bad as perhaps it was 30, 40 years ago. But the point is, it's still there and it still exists. And I think we need to keep working to try and, to get more people to understand that it's not any different to somebody with a physical illness or terminal illness. So, look, I'm confident over time we can do it. And I think the more that people speak out about it and share their stories, or share the fact that they're suffering at that particular time, I think that will help. But it's still something that as a society that we need to work on still. And I'm hoping in, who knows whether that will still be around in 5-10 years, and hopefully it won't be. But we need to keep working to sort of set that straight.
Yeah, the key is, there is still a lot of work to be done, but hopefully, we've mentioned your kids. I have a kid on the way in the very, very near future. So when you mention those, hopefully in our kids' lifetimes, that the stigma can be erased. Hopefully that is the goal. And, like we've mentioned on the other shows in the series, if you have any mental health worries, just do a quick Google search and see where, because obviously we're two different sides of the world here. I'm in Ireland and Justin's in Australia, so it's hard to give out that information. So just check what country you're in, where you can get that help, who you can talk to. It is just, the first thing is to talk, whether it's your family, whether it's a professional. It is just to get that door open and to start talking. So I hope you've enjoyed the shows that we've been doing. As we do this Let's Talk on OTI Media, please do hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter at Overtime Ireland. My name is Colm Kelly, and you can follow my guest, and that is Justin Twell. You can follow him at Justin1278 on Twitter. And of course, we mentioned his story. We did a video on his story, but there is also on his Twitter feed the link to the article that he did talking about his story in written format. So check that out as well. And until we're back with another show, of course, have a good one.